Welcome everybody today to Ashling's Health Show. I have one of the most special guests that I've ever had on my show today, and I'm so excited to introduce you to her. Barbra Wren was the founder of the College of Natural Nutrition and the author of Cellular Awakening and Our Return to Light, a new path of health and healing. Barbra has been one of the most instrumental people for me on my own journey. I went to her as a client 10 years ago. And up to that point, I had, been training as an occupational therapist, and I had my own health challenges with depression and anxiety. And going into Barbra's clinic and having that consultation was just such a game changer for me and completely changed the course of my life, because I ended up then training with her in her college. And as a result, I'm on the path that I'm on today. So Barbra, I'm so grateful to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Well, I mean, it's been a long journey because of my connection with your mother.
Yeah,
Martha,
it goes back even further. Yeah. My own mom had trained with Barbra back in London. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think I was quite young anyway. I don't remember.
Small.
I was very small.
Yeah.
But I remember, we were on holidays and it was actually a full moon. We're in Croatia. My mom said, "Oh, I know who you need to go to. We need to go to Barbra." So that was how the journey opened. But I think it's like, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. But I think your journey has been so incredible. But just kind of give people a bit of background context in terms of, you were a nurse and like what your own health experiences led you onto this path of healing. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, really, it's been joining up the dots. My background, my ancestry is very Irish. My parents lived in the north of England. And just because of the sort of mind I have, I can see patterns, and, I've been looking at things for 50 years now. And you absolutely know, if somebody is suffering from a particular condition, there would be a very interesting pattern of how they've led there. Nothing happens by chance, in other words. I think at the moment, the way modern medicine looks at things, this is what it is in isolation, but really just seeing the connection between everything. And the first very disruptive thing that happened to me was I had to have the BCG, once I'd started nursing, and my father didn't believe in vaccines. And so I'd escaped them up until that time. And I developed anorexia within 3 months. And so that sort of went into the back of my memory. But then as time went on, obviously becoming very interested in clinical evidence as opposed to medical evidence or scientific evidence, which I really quickly learned really didn't apply to what I was seeing. And then I have one brother. He has 4 children, and his 3rd child, who is now a doctor, she had the BCG, and within 3 months she was in hospital with anorexia. And then it just followed over the years how so many people brought their daughter to me with anorexia, and it had happened after vaccination. So all of these things, and this is really what inspired me to really encourage people to start joining up the dots and seeing, as I say, things don't happen in isolation. And so I was asked to teach by many people after practicing. And I was lucky enough to meet Dr. Alec Forbes, who started the Bristol Cancer Health Centre way back in the 1970s. And we set up a natural health clinic in Tiverton at the time, which was very exciting. People like Harry Oldfield, who was heading up Curly and Photography then, and all such people used to come. And we had a wonderful time. It was an absolute explosion of what we saw, things that weren't in the common path of people. Yeah.
So then the College of Natural Nutrition was born not long after that.
Yes, absolutely. I never intended to write. I never intended to teach, but people, pushed me into teaching, and then Hay House weren't going to take no for an answer in writing the books. So,
And it's been such a game changer, because I remember, like, as a student in your college, but not only that, but as a person who was on that path of healing myself, I felt just so much like just the paradigm that I'd come from, say, going to the doctor, going to a psychiatrist, being told you have depression, you're going to be on this medication, and kind of like forever, really, because there was never really a resolution, to then coming to you, to having all the picture, like my whole health picture connected, so that I could understand like how I got to where I was, and also then how I could actually reverse that chronic condition.
I think it's all about empowerment, isn't it?
Yeah.
We talk about envisaging the perfect, but I think people have to have education for that empowerment to lose the fear, so that they can actually bring about their own healing.
Yeah. I
Really
think one
important.
of the biggest things that I've so many things I've learned from you, but like one of the biggest game changers that I think is such a paradigm changer is the whole understanding of like acute illness versus chronic disease, and how
Mm,
we're kind of replacing, that we're getting rid of acutes, but then we're replacing it with chronic disease, and people are getting sicker younger and younger.
absolutely. I mean, the number of times, in a case history, say somebody is developing chronic fatigue ultimately, and when they were younger, it would be constant sore throats, antibiotics, and the body would be constantly throwing up these acutes, trying to get rid of the morbid matter. Each time it was sat upon until it loses that integrity. So there's no ability to produce acutes. It's all just going down into that toxic load, that chronic load that we carry around with us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes, I was talking this morning about the different levels of disease. Acute it's great. It's got heat, it's got movement. It really has an end game. Chronic
Yeah.
takes a bit of stirring up, as you know,
Yeah.
to get it. And we all come in with predispositions. We all choose, what we're going to work through. We come in with that
Yeah.
load.
Yeah.
And for me, predispositions are absolutely crucial to the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think especially because, a lot of people listening will be from Ireland here,
Mm.
in this podcast. So can you talk just about like the TB miasm? Because I think it's something that's so big and a lot of people's health stories, and they don't necessarily understand that because it's not really commonly spoken about.
Yes. Yes, that's an interesting one, actually, because um, with the BCG, the TB vaccine having such an impact on me, sort of looking very carefully at that and looking at statistics, I started reading a lot. And of course, it came upon how the thumbnail sketch of TB is the inability to keep calcium in the correct place. And of course, a lot of the old Irish novels where people were literally taking the lime wash off the walls, in the latter stages. So if we see those four electrolytes, the sodium, potassium, and the calcium and magnesium, as that electrical charge of the body, that kind of what is charged up as that life force in the physical biochemical, when we know we're energy, but if you take it down into the body, if we come in with, if you said to me, okay, where would you look for predispositions, Barbara, or strength of, I'd say, well, I'd look at liver, because the liver controls hydration. And so if we're talking about people coming in with a tubercular miasm, as we do as homeopaths, or as in natural nutrition, a tubercular taint, it means that the liver is finding it quite difficult to keep calcium in the right place, which automatically tells you there's something a bit funny going on with magnesium and, and vitamin D.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you then start looking at the work of the late Dr. Carl Pfeiffer, whose work I loved, when he was a specialist with schizophrenia, and he saw that there was a condition he called pyroluria, which was a liver condition, whereby the dehydration causes a lot of the byproducts of metabolism to accumulate in the body. And if they don't go away quickly enough, this is when the heme of the blood breaks down, it produces something called cryptopyrroles. And these little characters are completely harmless if they wash away, but instead they go and bind your vitamin B6 and your zinc. And so if the vitamin B6 is bound, you've lost your cofactor for magnesium.
Mm.
So immediately we're seeing that as an issue. Also, the B6 is the cofactor for zinc. And so that's being knocked out. So we have calcium in the wrong place, magnesium deficient, so the natural soothing of the body. The zinc keeps copper in place. And if that goes very high, then the whole electrical circuitry, the nervous system, particularly at brain level, hence schizophrenia, bipolar,
Mm-hmm.
you name it, be it ADHD, any of those labels that have come to be, where the sort of circuitry is being interfered with, then you would suspect there would be a tubercular taint.
Yes.
Because it's showing at mind level,
Mm-hmm.
so it's gone beyond lungs. So we've got this real problem of keeping calcium in the right place, so the blood sugar's affected, the energy's affected, the mood, the anxiety is there. And then also what we're seeing today, which is really worrying, is this high sensitivity to the electromagnetic pollution.
Yeah.
People have high, in fact, there was a gentleman from Ireland this very week consulting me. And, to be honest, it was hardly a nutritional consultation. It was the amount of Wi-Fi he had around him, his
Mhm.
job, the time he spent doing all of this. You know, our body can't take it. You know,
Yeah.
we're energetic beings, and this bombardment of resonance coming at us is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, if we're in this tubercular picture, which is what I very quickly noticed, and of course, Southern Ireland has the highest tubercular picture on the planet, although other countries are catching up. China, the government there, really worried about the growth of TB. Here in England, they're getting very worried. You know, it really is getting out of hand. And if people want to be worried about a pandemic, that's where they need to be looking.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
That was one of the questions I wanted to ask you actually about like
yeah.
your thoughts on the COVID and that in
Mm.
relation to like the TB. Is there any kind of connection between the two? As in like if
Um,
people have that predisposition, are they more
more
prone
susceptible.
to getting it? Or yeah, is there any
Mm.
issues around that?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I don't consider COVID a pandemic,
Yeah.
personally.
Yeah.
Um, you know, my own view is that every year we have seasonal flu after the autumn equinox where the body naturally cleanses. And if you keep producing vaccines and vaccinating against an acute illness that you were raising that very question, you are going to weaken people at a very quick rate. And my
Yeah.
observation over the last 5-10 years is it's a bigger and bigger problem, this natural seasonal flu, because it's being
Yeah.
interfered with. I don't know in Ireland, but here, you know, if you're over 70, you're given the flu vaccine, the pneumonia, and the shingles all together. And this year, there's an added ingredient to flu vaccine for people over 65. I have no idea what that ingredient is.
Okay.
So if you carry a tubercular taint, you're going to have to work harder at keeping the immune system really strong. It
Yeah.
has gifts that go with it, you know.
Yeah.
When we're looking at creativity and all of those sort of things and exploring things beyond the normal sort of boundaries. But if we're talking about health, yes, I mean, you could say that, but more than that, Aisling, I would say that people become more vulnerable if they're on Western drugs. You know, and when you look at these people in the care homes, they are given the vaccine before anybody else because they're top of the considered necessary list.
Yeah.
So they're vaccinated, and it wouldn't just be one vaccine, it would be several.
Mm-hmm.
And so their immune system would be in a very poor state going through the winter months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
But
think that's the issue with Italy, isn't it? You know, they would have an older population. So I think I heard that as well, that they would have had a lot of flu vaccinations before all the issue with COVID happened.
yes, and I think very quickly they put statistics together, didn't they, and realized the vulnerability. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, and at least they have the decency to say that the people who died with COVID had very big underlying conditions.
Yeah.
And this is where
Yeah.
all the manipulation of the way it's looked at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you speak to people who are kind of, you know, seeing through it, but also, you know, I suppose hard to navigate this time when there's so much fear around COVID
Yeah.
and yeah, from I think the virus itself, but also the fear of government control and you
Mm.
know our bodily autonomy.
Well, for me, the first thing is if you give it thought, you're helping it be created. You know, I
Yeah.
think it's very, very, very important. You know, one of my big teachers has always been Rudolf Steiner.
Yeah.
And of course, he called his science spiritual science. And the importance of understanding things, you know, at all levels and that energetic level. And, you know, at a Steiner school, a child does not read until the age of 7 because it has to be left in the imagination. Because if we can't imagine, it won't come to be.
Yes.
And so if we can't imagine the perfect, if we can't stay centered and that, so the only thing that stops any potential for anything is fear. And they've done a very good job. I mean, the corporate world has really spun an amazing story in frightening people. And I have respect for people's fear. It isn't like I'm one of those people who, you know, is sneering or laughing at it. I have utter respect for that because, you know, just from the makeup of people, you know, anxiety, well, you know, from being with people, it was always there. I mean, in Carl Pfeiffer's time, you know, anxiety went with the pyroluria. It's now called the anxiety syndrome. And, you know, it's unusual to meet anybody who isn't deeply anxious. So they've got people there. But what I would say is we need to wake up to the fact that we are at the top of the endangered species. Let there be no doubt that humans are right at the top of the endangered species. And it goes, you know, with the inner and outer biome that Zach Bush talks about, what we've done to planet Earth, what we've done to the universe. This disrespect. I mean, this morning I was talking about encouraging the kinesiologists to look at biodynamic growing, where, you know, it isn't just organic, but you're using all of the universal energies and rhythms, you know, to enhance this. And I was just quoting, you know, my late partner, where he experimented when I first introduced him to it by planting with the moon and against the moon and looking at the speed of germination. There was no comparison.
That's
you
amazing.
know, but all of these things have been lost. You know, they're all here for a reason, these rhythms, and we should really be working with them.
Yeah. And that was something that, like, you really introduced me to in the process of studying in your college of natural nutrition, which was about like going back to our natural rhythms, and how I think we've gone so far away from nature that we actually will become extinct if we don't change our ways.
Without a doubt, Aisling. And I was thinking of Rudolf Steiner in 1926 in one of his lectures, where he was saying there will be an evil web surrounding our planet. So he was talking about the internet. And he said the impact of that, if we're not careful, will have such a resonance effect that it will lower the resonance of humans to being barely above that of the mineral kingdom. So to lower the resonance to that level of density, you know, you're not human anymore. And he said there is only one way out, and that is to become involved with nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're kind of almost, that's what I feel, it's like we're being pushed into it. As in, like, you know, the choice is, I suppose, continue on this path or return back to nature and back to
doing it properly.
Our true selves. And I think it's for me anyway, personally, it's very much like this whole, that the outside, and I think this was the journey I went through from working with you, was like, before it was like my health was on the outside, you know, it was like it was the authority taking care of me, and I didn't really have any role in it. But then it was this complete like self-reclamation and journeying back to yourself, and actually like becoming your own individuated being is really, I think, you know, that's really, for me anyway, I'm like, what's the other alternative right now other than to take this path yourself?
Absolutely. You know, and when people say, you know, what do you do? I would hope that I'm a facilitator to enable people to get in touch with their own inner wisdom, because only their own inner wisdom knows what is right for their journey. You know, a therapist doesn't know, you know. So it really is empowerment for them to get back in and trust. But at the moment, you know, the nanny state everywhere, you know, people giving up their power, the codependency. And interestingly, when we talk about codependency, the physical makeup of somebody who is utterly codependent is very high copper, low zinc. So think of the pyroluria, which is, you know, growing alarmingly.
That's huge. And because I remember in one of your lectures you were saying about the importance of placenta encapsulation, taking the placenta so that we balance the levels, and so that's something.
I mean, humans and animals are the only two mammals who don't eat their placenta. I mean, my little dog, I mean, when she'd given birth to these two puppies, she kept jumping up on my bed, and there was this really horrible discharge. And Anna, who, you know, my youngest daughter, managed to get these tiny, tiny puppies latched onto her nipples and suck. And then this big placenta came out, and she gobbled it up, and she was quite serene after that. You know, she knew her body needed to do that, and it just needed that little bit more. And of course, it's interesting because the placenta is very, very rich in zinc. And towards the end of a pregnancy, the copper goes up, because you need that for the convulsion of the labor, for the baby to be born. But then you need to restore the zincs, because the baby's outside you then. So it you know, it's not so codependent on the mother's body. You eat the placenta, so with the colostrum, which is rich in zinc, it's starting to give that little bit of independence to this new baby on its journey. Then where the difficulty comes, and you're talking about the acutes disappearing, zinc is so required for going through puberty, for the sexual maturity. And of course, if the person is low in zinc to begin with, I always look at the age of about 15 or 16, because that's when all the mental health issues tend to show themselves these days. Yeah, really important.
So what would you say is a kind of important part of people's practice now with their health at this particular time? What do you think is
Yes,
very
I
important?
think um, in a nutshell, I would think it is this recognizing that light is so important,
Mhm.
so important. And it's something that, well, you know, having been through the college, it's such a big part of the teaching because it's been removed from nutrition. But
Mhm.
2/3 of our energy should come from light and just
Yeah.
1/3 from the food. So
Mhm.
this means that being outside is important, but vitamin D3 for the immune system is very, very important, and zinc and magnesium, and just eating as many fresh vegetables, you know, that we possibly can. If you can get them organic, you know, please do, because within the organic vegetables is the fourth phase water, and the fluid in our body should be in the fourth phase, H3O2, not H2O, because, I mean, if people listening want to look at the work of Gerald Pollack, who revealed this fourth stage of water, solid, liquid, gas, and fourth phase. So we're actually like giant batteries with the water that's been charged by sunlight,
Yeah.
and that's where the energy. So yeah, I mean, it's to stay positive, it's to stay connected, to stay in touch with nature, you know, be aware if you can grow vegetables or just grow a few herbs, get involved with that cycle of life.
Yeah.
Really, really important because that always will strengthen the immune system. Yeah.
Yeah. Even getting your hands into the soil, I think, is just
Yes,
so healing.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
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 Beautiful.
So important.
And just the last point I wanted to raise, this is something that hasn't affected that many people, but I know of two individuals, and
Mm.
they got COVID, and they have like post-viral fatigue that's kind of lasted months and months after. Could you
Yes.
speak to
Yes,
why
it's
that would show up in
interesting.
someone?
Yes. I mean, COVID has only just pushed them into what was already there.
Okay.
That's all, you
Okay.
know. So what you see there is COVID should have been a healing crisis, but somehow it's been aborted,
Yeah.
that healing crisis, for whatever reason, whatever it was. One would need to know the individual stories.
Hmm.
But if it wasn't supported with techniques to follow itself through, because there would have been a weakness to begin with, then the person will need to have their immune system reactivated. And so this is what we're seeing. Because obviously there's this enormous fear if
Yeah.
people get diagnosed with it. I mean, that's enough to abort anything,
Yeah.
you know, not
Yeah.
to be able to allow the body to go through and relax into that healing crisis, you know, when people have temperatures, so the molecules move quickly, there's an elimination, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All of that. It turns from a very natural event into a really threatening event. And
Yeah.
that stops it doing its job. And
Hmm.
so you're then left with the byproducts of metabolism or the morbid matter that should have been removed still in the system. And so
Hmm.
the name of the game then is to go through and work with releasing that.
Yeah.
We're going to
Yeah.
see a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's like that's the kind of the other end of it, isn't it?
it is.
When people
It
have
is.
gone through it, and
Yeah,
yeah.
because people must remember COVID doesn't exist in isolation. It's in the person who's got a history. You
Okay.
know, it's within the
Yeah.
person's case history, you know,
Yeah. And
and
that,
looking at that.
and that's the thing with like the whole like germ theory versus the terrain theory. And I
Yes.
suppose, I'm walking around the place kind of going, oh my gosh, so my understanding is completely different now from having that understanding. But I
Yes.
can see where people are in fear because, oh my gosh, like if I thought that it was coming just
Mm.
anywhere, you would
Yes.
just feel like, oh my, I don't even want to leave my house.
Exactly. Exactly that. I mean, they've done a good job. They
Yeah.
really, really have. But then, of course, if you teach everybody the work of Pasteur instead
Yeah.
of Bechamp,
Yeah.
you're lost. I mean, you're
Yeah.
in the hands of the corporate world
Yeah.
because, you know, it's something that invades you and you've got to kill it, you know, so you
Yeah.
meet it in opposition instead of going with it, as in the
Yeah.
martial arts, you know, which is the whole allopathic approach of resist, you know,
Yeah.
lose energy, create chaos, and leave the body with a bigger job to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, share with us your vision for those who are on the path and are bridging from that old paradigm to the new
Yeah.
world, new reality. What would you say, and what's your vision that you're holding for us all?
Oh, I think it's so exciting, Ashley. I was talking to a lady the same age as myself yesterday who used to run the Biodynamic Society for Southwest. We were just saying how honoured we feel to be alive at this time, because obviously we can look back to many different ways of being already. That dear, dear sun, Alcyone, the major sun that our galaxy moves around, I mean, the level of photon, that light that's being shed, I just think we're going to make such a shift. I think it's going to be quite heartrending, the information that comes out about all the things that have gone on and what will be revealed. And I think it's quite painful for people, to come to realize this, but everything's got to change. Otherwise we're extinct. I went to a discussion with Caroline Lucas, the Green Party, or she was the Green Party leader then. And she said, we have 10 years. David Attenborough says the same thing. We've got 10 years.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I saw his documentary. I was like,
yeah. I mean, he's 94. And we have to take responsibility, each and every one of us, and produce those biophotons from within, trap, transmutation, alchemy. Alchemy happens. Why is it only in children's books? Alchemy is taking place. If we get back to that, all the magic can come back. That's what I envisage, a really magical transition. If we actually allow people to come out of the fear, support them, and see what the potential is, and stop holding back on what the potential is.
Yeah. But really. So funny. It's so funny because there's such a connection between you, myself, my mom in this journey. And she passed physically in 2018, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And she had asked me the summer before, what is the message that we're here to share with the world?
Yeah.
And the message came through was you're here, like, moving from fear to trust.
Absolutely. It's the only thing that stops us doing anything.
Yeah.
Fear.
So we're writing that book right now. Well, I finished writing it, so it's a collaboration between both of us.
Lovely.
Me here, my mom over there.
Yes. Well, the veil is so thin.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So thin.
Yeah.
She is so present.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll never forget my trip over when we took on the whole fluoride thing and tramping through fields and talking to people. It was wonderful. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. You set that ablaze, and I remember it was like a harpoon went through my heart, and I was just like, oh. You said you have to do something about the fluoride, and I was like, I'm that person. I must do this, and but it's all part of it. But I do feel it's like, because I think there's so much fear, but it's actually coming out of it so that we can step into the role that we've come here for to facilitate this transition.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely agree with you, Aisling. We're at that real pinnacle. I think we've passed that critical mass. I think, we've tilted the lever, and I think we're definitely that whole sort of dimensional shift, if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let everybody know where they can reach you and find your work and all that good stuff.
Well, I'm really happy to give you my email address, which is rennutrition@gmail.com. Really happy to receive emails.
Yeah, perfect.
I am not somebody into technology. I hate, loathe, and detest it, but I do read my emails.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Wonderful. But yeah, we'll include all the links to your books and everything. Yeah.
Thank you, Aisling.
So, thanks a million.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you.
'Cause when you smile